One, to be aware of it.
Mm.
When we think about money, it resonates in the same part of the limbic system in our brain where food and sex resonate. So you think about either of those two things, a little bit is good, a lot must be better. Spending money the same way. And so what we have to do is begin to try and decouple emotions. And the people who have had trauma around it have to look, all of us, our spending and saving investment habits often go back to when we were 6, 7 years old. We don't even recognize it. It's what we heard at the kitchen table, heard at the dining room table.
Welcome, everybody, back to another exciting show of the About That Wallet podcast, where I have the awesome opportunity to bring on somebody who has been in this industry for more than 30 years. They have been teaching people across the country, have been doing talks amongst many of people. And her main focus is for the women. Okay, so you ladies actually lean in a little closer because you actually might want to need this one. And I want to bring to the stage Ilene Slatko. Thank you so much for coming through, Ilene.
Oh, my pleasure. So happy to be here with you. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And we actually met up with, we were able to make this connection from Bill, who is, I believe, the owner at this point of My True Prosperity.
Yeah, he founded it. Mm-hmm.
Sweet. Yeah, because, and I love what he's doing, pretty much connecting people together and bringing such conversations that we have in today. For your ears and for everybody that's out there.
Yeah, good.
Yeah. So what we're going to be talking about, and one of the things I want to talk to you about is because you've been doing this for about 30 years, retirement is something that a lot of people are afraid of. What is it that, some of the people that are close to retirement should be thinking about like right now?
Great question. And one of the things that I talk about a lot, so I do specialize in working with women, but then in my main business, but then in my other business, I do webinars for everyone. And I do a lot of programs for corporate settings as well as for the federal government. So I get people in there that are, within 4 or 5 years of retirement. And so one of the things that we talk about is they rely, I think, erroneously on this old sort of, 60-40, 70-30 split. The closer I get to retirement, I should put everything into safety, safe investments. And I say to them, well, are you going to die soon after you retire? Because if you're not going to die soon, I hate to put it so bluntly, but the truth is, right, nowadays, like, in my family, women live into their mid 90s or so. My mother is 88 and a half years old, doing just fine, driving herself to bridge twice a week to play. We can't afford, those people who are close to retirement cannot afford to have everything in safety. Why? Because safe amounts or safe interest rates, right, don't exceed inflation and taxation. And those are the two things that eat away at the value of your purchasing power. So people like to look at their statement, whether it's online or, the paper kind, right? And they go, oh, thank God it didn't drop this month, or, oh, I see it stayed even, or I went up a little bit. My question to them is it going up enough to account for what inflation and taxation is going to eat away? Because the reason we put money away for retirement is to maintain our purchasing power. Right? That at the end of the day, I want purchasing power when I'm 70. I want purchasing power when I'm 80. I want purchasing power when I'm 90. So back to what I said before, which I know you laughed at, but unless I'm going to die right after I retire, I might need to account for like 20, 30 years worth of taxation and inflation. So I say to people now, we need to have a conversation about what real risk is. And real risk is not maintaining purchasing power.
Now, you did not just come to this fruition on just like a drop of a dime. You had something tragically happen for the women in your life, where 3 guys had passed away. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I was just getting into the business. I mean, maybe a year or two after all this happened. So I was in investments, but I was what I say on the other side of the coin. So I was working in real estate and I had bought some properties. I was actually trainer for the Northern Virginia, DC area for what was then called Merrill Lynch Realty. It no longer exists anymore. But my grandfather passed away. Then within the next month, my stepfather passed away. And then 2 months later, an uncle passed away. And so the widows they left, including my mom, had varying amounts of resources to deal with. They were all smart women. My grandmother, very old fashioned, so not so much her, but the other two women were smart women, had the ability to understand investments, but didn't know what to do. And so I was in Merrill Lynch. I switched from the real estate side over to Merrill Lynch, Pierce, Fenner and Smith when that was in existence. And back then, the way we built business was what we called smile and dial. You know, a list of 200 names every day, and you're supposed to call all of them and introduce yourself and try and, get money. And I thought, oh, God, no, I can't do that. So I thought, well, I speak. I was an actor in college. I've been on stage. I've done some small films. I'm going to use that ability to connect with people. And then I started thinking about what my life experience was. And I thought, women. So I wrote Women and Their Money based on the experience in my family. And it was a very comprehensive, it's probably the first of its kind in the country. Actually, it wasn't sponsored by anyone. There was no sales materials, no literature at the programs. And of course, this was when everything was in person, and it was 8 hours. Women had to come back 4 weeks in a row and spend 2 hours with me. And they crowded into, I had standing room only, and that was how I built my business, through Women and Their Money. So I still actually offer that, obviously updated, but that was how and of course, now we know with gender pay gap and longevity issues and being out of the workforce to raise children or to take care of parents, generally those things fall to the women. There's a huge discrepancy in our Social Security amounts, because that's based on our high 35 of earning years. So if we're out of the workforce, it's based on that. 401k, generally based on a percentage of our income. Paying off debts. Again, if we don't have as much income because of the gender pay gap, we can't pay down as much. So all of those things impact what we can invest and what we can put away for retirement. So to me, that was my sweet spot. And as you can probably tell, it still is. I love it.
And being a woman in the space, and obviously the financial space has been, I'm sure, has its challenges, especially when it's mostly a male-dominated, just say like a white male-dominated space. How did you navigate that process?
Well, in today's world, these two quick examples I'm going to give you are just so can't believe that would ever happen. But again, this was the world back in 1987. So my first experience was with, back then we had what we call the up broker. So every day it would rotate, you would be the up broker for a few hours, and whoever just walked into the office would be assigned to the up broker. So I had an older gentleman who walked into the office, and I sat with him and we talked about what he wanted to do. And I was fairly new, so I wanted to research the bonds that he wanted. He wanted me to build a bond ladder. So I said, let me work with my bond traders. I'll call you this afternoon and, we'll make some decisions. He said, fine. That afternoon, after I had done all the homework and talked to the bond traders and put everything together, I see the same guy walk into the office and go to sit with another guy, a stockbroker, about as inexperienced as I was at the time. I went to my manager and I said, what the heck? That's my client. And my manager said to me, yeah, he doesn't want to work with you. You're a girl.
Wow.
And of course, the client was always right. So that was that. And then I had a woman, which was actually, this is going to sound horrible. It turned out very funny. She lugged in a suitcase full of papers. And I spent hours going through the papers and organizing and figuring out what she wanted. At the very end of all of that, she said to me, oh, by the way, are you Jewish? And I was like, oh my God, I'm going to lose this business because of my religion. And so I said, yes, is that a problem? She goes, I love you people. You know how to manage money well. So, but that's what we got back then. I mean, we got people that said all sorts of crazy stuff. And we were at the effect, right? Because those people were always right. Or the clients were always right. And there were out of 100 and some people in the office, 10 were women.
Mm.
10 were women. So it was a very different environment, but it toughened me up. So
Yeah, and that's one of the things that's like being the only person and being it's kind of lonely at the top, I guess you would say. Not even at the top, but just lonely in the space.
yeah, you don't have anyone really to talk to about your experience. The guys are, guys hit on me that I worked with because we just didn't have that many women. So, hey, they were shooting fish in a barrel, basically, hitting on their coworkers. Like none of those things would be acceptable now.
Mm-mm. Yeah, because it's a definitely a little flashlight in the dark of what you're just sharing here, and obviously it's a lot more goes on everywhere else. But thank you for shedding light onto that the work environment back then,
No,
because some of the people who, like you said, is coming to this retirement age, they might be have 5 years left, and they do feel kind of lonely at the top, and even though they ready to get out of the job, some people are actually afraid. And I've talked to some of them, and they was like, I really don't know what I'm gonna do when I retire, what I'm gonna do. So they'll stay at work for like an extra 2 to 3 years just because they don't know or figure out anything. And I know earlier you talked about getting your expenses right, but what should somebody that's looking to get ready, like what should they do? Or like the first thing they should do while they in preparation?
great question. Because people frequently assume that it's just a financial readiness, but there's a whole other side of retirement readiness that has to do with, like, is your spouse, if you're married or if you have a partner, are they on the same page as you? I talked to a guy one time who was in a hotel. He was a really tiny little hotel, and not like cool tiny boutique, but just inexpensive tiny hotel. And he checked me in, and then he was the bartender. So I started talking to him. I said, "Have you always been in hospitality?" He said, "Oh no, I retired from the military." And he named whatever rank, but it was clearly a high rank. I said, "How'd you find yourself here?" And he said, "Well, I was retired for about 2 weeks. And then my kids and my wife came to me and they said, you have to go find a job and get out of the house. You're driving us crazy." So I always tell people, you got to get your spouse and your partner on the same page. Then you have to figure out, like, what do you see in your future? How do you want to spend the time? Now, even without commuting, the biggest part of our day, or certainly equal part to sleeping, is working.
Yes.
Right. So what are you going to do with those 8 hours? You wake up and you go, oh, look, it's 9:35. I've got all day to do nothing. That gets old after a very short time. So I say to people, you got to dream. You got to figure out what it is you want. You have to plan for that. As much as you plan for your money, you have to plan for how you want to live your life. And so I have I give people assignments about writing a day in the life of their retirement life as though it were today. Because one of the things that we found is that there's a interesting relationship between how we use language, both how we think about and how we actually use it, and how ready we are for things, how much we act on those things. And so I tell people to write a letter to themselves, or a story. It doesn't even have to be a letter, but it's a story about today. I spent time with my grandchildren. Today, I took that art class I've wanted to take. Not I'm going to do it in 10 years, but do it in present tense, because that spurs us to action, is what linguistic researchers have discovered. There's a great tie between how we use language and how much we set aside for retirement, believe it or not.
Yeah. So, because I was thinking about that a little bit when it comes to that financial language that we speak to ourselves. And for some of the people who are just starting their jobs out, like having the sacrifice of fun and so forth, like what would you feel like what should be like a good, as you could say, sayings around that finances that's been helpful to you that you would like to pass on to others?
Two things real quickly. One, and we talk a lot about the wealth transfer that's about to happen and is going on now. That's from baby boomers, of which I'm one, right? The baby boomers, as we die off, because I'm at the young side of the baby boomers, but as we die off and our money goes to, younger generations, it's huge amount of money right now that's being transferred in this wealth transfer. I encourage people to look at wealth transfer on a daily basis. And that is whenever you go to buy something, you have to be cognizant of the fact. And when I say you, I mean all of us, myself included. When we go to buy something, we have to be cognizant of the fact that we are at that moment choosing to transfer our wealth to that shopkeeper, that seller, so that every time I go and I get stuck. I'm a shoe person. So I saw myself doing this in the pandemic, like, I love those black shoes. I got to have them. And then I thought, why? First of all, you're not going anywhere. We're in a lockdown. Second of all, how many pairs of black shoes do you actually need? And third of all, why are you choosing to give that company X amount of money when you could keep it in your own pocket? So I encourage people to think about the wealth transfer on a daily basis. And then I also encourage them to think about what's called the rule of 72, which you probably are familiar with it, and your listeners are probably familiar with it. But again, it's a real simple calculation telling you in how many years it takes for your money to double. So a way to sort of reframe all of this is to say, and I'll use this, I'll use just a round number. So when people were getting their pandemic checks from the government, I saw young people standing in line to buy high price leather items. They were statement pieces. They're like, I got $1,800. I'm just going to go spend it all on this. So let's just use the $1,000. And I would say to them, if you spend that $1,000 today to buy yourself a purse and you're 25 years old, and you could have that money invested at X amount. What you need to do is work that rule of 72. And, that's actually a $30,000 or $40,000 purse that you're going to be carrying around in terms of what that money could be worth in the future. So sometimes it's does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense.
So we just have to reframe how we think about it. It's not the 1,000 today. It's like, what would that be worth? First, do I really want to make that wealth transfer between me and that person? And then what would that be worth? And oftentimes that's enough to have people say, oh, yeah, right. Let me keep that money here in my investment account, or let me start putting it into an investment account.
Yeah. And with that, because a lot of times people have traumas around their finances. And I want to ask you, how can we help people overcome their financial trauma without really putting them on a couch?
One, to be aware of it. When we think about money, it resonates in the same part of the limbic system in our brain where food and sex resonate. So you think about either of those two things, a little bit is good, a lot must be better. Spending money the same way. And so what we have to do is begin to try and decouple emotions. And the people who have had trauma around it have to, which look, all of us, our spending and saving investment habits often go back to when we were 6, 7 years old. We don't even recognize it. It's what we heard at the kitchen table, heard at the dining room table, when our parents were fighting about how hard it is to make money, or how easy it is, or how I spend money to make myself feel good when I've had a bad day. Those are things we carry forward. So we have to learn to decouple emotion and try and make financial decisions that are numbers. If I spend this, then I won't have X amount when I retire. If I save this and invest it at this or that amount, what's the difference in what it will be worth? So I like to have, help people see finances not as how they think about it first, because that's an emotional thought, but to decouple it and try and approach it just from math. I have I have people in my classes sometimes that'll say, I can't decide which account I should take it from. Like, should I take it from I'll give you an easy example. I have money sitting in a savings account and I have money growing at 10% in the market. Where should I take my retirement money from? How much is the savings account earning? Well, 3.5%, 4%, whatever, right? Or less, depending on when the question was. Well, okay, if you take it from 10%, you're losing the difference between 10% and 3.5%. So why would you do that? Right? I mean, we have to look at money as numbers. If we decouple it and just look at it as numbers, we might be able to then look back and say, oh, now I see why I think about it that way, and maybe move past it.
Yeah, one of the things that I liked that you've when I was doing my research about you, you did this one scenario that I really loved, which was the fast car whipping in and out of traffic. And you're the driver, not the driver in that vehicle, but you're just driving and you're minding your business, going, normal pace as all of us do, right? We don't go over the speed limit. Mm-hmm. And you have those who are like zipping in and out of traffic. And your first concept of thinking about it is why? Like you feel angry, like you have your own thoughts on what's going on with that person. But then you put in a different scenario of saying, well, that person has a mother that's about to deliver a baby. They have to make it to the hospital to make sure that the baby is delivered safely. Now your energy has changed based on understanding it more than actually not understanding it. And I thought that was really powerful to kind of look at your finances in a similar direction or somebody else's situation that way.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for having researched and found that. That is one of my favorite stories to tell. And of course, that the whole concept there at the end of that story is the message that if we change our story, we can change our outcome. So we all have these stories that we tell ourselves. I'm not good at managing money. I can't get a promotion. I don't know the first thing about finances, or math is too hard for me. And if we look at that and just change the story, then we can change the outcome.
Yeah. I was like, that's such a powerful moment. Thank you for saying that way.
Yeah. Wow. I'm really touched that you found that.
Yeah. So, we understand our story, and we also understand how we should kind of look at our portfolio and look at retirement, which comes up to the third segment now, which is the features. And this one is personal for you. Is what skills or habits that you feel will take you to the next level?
The same thing that I tell my clients: patience, continuous working towards a goal. I am someone who probably will never retire because I love what I do. I love hopefully making a difference to people. But there are days that I don't want to attend to what I should attend to. And then there are days that I wake up and I'm like, I've got 12 things on my to-do list and I'm going to power through all of them. So I have a plan, and it doesn't happen overnight. Being successful, becoming wealthy, whatever our goal is, none of those things happen overnight unless you win the lottery, right? So sticking to it, one step at a time, one foot in front of the other. Same for me, same as what I tell people I work with.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's nice. Is there anything that you want to leave the audience before we go to the final 4 questions?
Well, that's a great question. I know we talked a little bit about the language. So I just want to get into that for just 2 seconds more. And that is that a minute, maybe, that there is studies have shown, and again, there are people that weigh in on both sides of these issues, but studies have shown, including the last one in 2013 by a associate professor, at Yale, I believe. the studies have shown that there is a relationship between how we think about money, how we talk about money, and how well we invest and save for retirement. So here's a quick way to get yourself to that next level. And that is, they found that languages, cultures that have tenses. So I will do it tomorrow. I did it yesterday. I'm going to do it. Think about January 1 coming up. Everyone's going to set, right, their New Year's resolution. And for some large percentage of the population, within a week or two, it's already in the rearview mirror, right? Because we set great intentions, we don't follow through. One of the issues might be is that we're thinking, I will do this. I'm going to do this with retirement. I don't need to do it now. I'm only 27 years old. I will do it next year when I get my next, when I get my raise, when I get another job, when. And then before you know it, 20, 30 years has passed by. So what the researchers found was, in those cultures, German is one of these languages, the Hopi language here in the US, in a culture or language where there's no difference in tenses, those people are much more prepared for retirement financially. Sure. So in thinking about, the same way I said, think about retirement like your day as though it's now, we think about those people who think about saving for retirement and they say, I save for retirement, as opposed to I will save for retirement. The people that say I save for retirement, they actually do save more. There's a marked difference between the people that have financial readiness for retirement and the language structure. And so we have a structure here that allows for tenses. It works against us. So I just thought I'd throw that out. I think it's fascinating. It's, it feels like human nature, but in fact, it's really a lot related to our language structure. So we need to figure out a way to get, jumpstart our brains to ignore that, I think.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that maybe it could just be one of those ways that we could teach or bring that into the schools, is the tense of language.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating study to me.
Yeah, who knows? That might be your next book.
Maybe.
All right, you ready for the final four?
I am.
All righty. Number one, what does wealth mean to you?
Not having to worry.
Number two, what was your worst money mistake?
Putting my head in the sand and thinking that if I pretended an issue didn't exist, it would just go away. I'm sure I'm not the only one that's done that, but I was certainly guilty of that earlier in my life.
Yeah, we've been there.
Most of us probably have. Yep.
Number three, what was your favorite financial or non-financial book?
So my favorite book is a book called Crossing to Safety, written by Wallace Stegner. And to sort of tie back into this conversation about do it now, don't wait, don't plan for the future. I loved that book. I mean, it touched me so deeply. My intention was to reach out to the author, to write a note and just let him know how much I loved it and how much it touched me. And it was always, I will do it. I'll get around to it. And then I found out that he had died in a car accident. And so I couldn't do that. So it's very important to just do what we need to do today. Don't put it off.
Yeah. Number four, what is your favorite dish to make?
Yeah, I am known for my cannelloni.
Cannelloni.
Yeah.
What is it? I never heard of it.
Yeah, cannelloni is stuffed shells. There's a base of so it's meat stuffed with some cheese, and then it sits on a base of white sauce, actually, what's called bechamel sauce, and then covered with red sauce. At least that's how I make it. And I learned to make that when I was in home ec, believe it or not, way back when. I don't even know if they still offer home ec, but for, I don't know, 50 years I've been making that.
Wow. Yeah, because when I was in middle school, they did have home ec, and we made pizza, like dough and stuff like that, but never these. These look amazing. Wow. All right. Learn something new today. Cool.
Good.
All right. The very last question of the show, which is where could people find out more about you?
So if people are ready to tackle retirement issues, everyone, not just women, if they're ready to tackle retirement, beginning to think about it, maybe worry a little bit about preparedness, I have a subscription-based micro webinar learning platform. And it's metamorphosisready.com is where they can find me. Metamorphosis is designed for people 40 and older, and they're all micro programs. So how does Social Security work? How do I figure out when to take it? How does Medicare work? What's financial preparedness for retirement? What's other, preparedness for retirement, non-financial? Women and Their Money is up there. So that's a really cool site. I think lots of training programs there. Short.
I mean, it better be a cool site. You did it. Like, it's the best site out there, right?
Thank you. Of course, the best ever.
Right.
Until your next guest.
You have to ownership of your stuff. It's yours. But yes, please, guys, if you out there and you're looking forward to having a discussion about your Social Security, and obviously, this is educational purposes only. If you want the details, obviously go to your financial advisor. And you used to be a financial advisor, right?
I did. I worked in the business for about 30 years.
Wow.
Selling products. I no longer sell products. I just consult about how to think about money, and then I do my training programs.
Nice. Yeah. So, I mean, you get a one-stop shop with you, and that's amazing because you can't find that with most people. They can kind of guide you to some things, but you can give them pretty much cradle to grave with their finances, or soup to nuts, whatever saying you want to use.
At least how to think about it, and the salient information. And then the best thing I think that I've done with those programs is that each course has a downloadable list of 5 actionable items, because we take programs all the time. We take seminars, webinars, we listen to talks, speeches, podcasts, and we go, oh man, she was great. He was fabulous. 2 weeks, 2 months, a year later, you think, what am I supposed to do with that information? I've totally forgotten. So Metamorphosis has 5 actionable items with every single course. Here's what you do now that you've taken this 20-minute or 30-minute program.
So what would you give them, at least one action item for them for listening to this episode then?
Because it's a big topic, and I don't know what the answer is going to be, but Social Security, as you know, and as your guests or as your listeners know, some of you might be a little angry that I might get 100% of my Social Security benefits, and some of you won't. We don't know how that's going to, but if you go to ssa.gov, there's a portal that you can open up and create what's called a My Social Security account. And then you can see exactly what the information the government has on you. There's a sliding scale. There's a button that slides. It shows you how much you're going to make based on their assumptions that you continue to work and continue to earn the same amount. But what you're going to make at 62, which is when we're eligible, all the way up to what you would make if you waited until 70, which is when enhanced benefits stop growing. So that's pretty cool to play around with that. So I would say open up that account.
Awesome. Well, I can't thank you enough for being on the show. Wealth of information, and I cannot wait to have you back on. If you guys want to see her back on the show to talk about more Social Security stuff, make sure you put that inside the show notes. I mean, not the show notes. Put that in the comments on YouTube, and I believe I'll have it open up in the comments so you can put that in for Spotify as well, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you again so much, Ilene. It's amazing to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. I loved talking with you prior to the show and getting to know each other. And on the show, you're a great host. I really appreciate it. I look forward to coming back.
Awesome. All right. See you, everybody. Y'all be safe.
Bye, everyone.